Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Kiss and Purrs. My name is Leslie, and today we're going to be discussing a book for my interview with the Vampire Inspired Readathon. Right now we're focusing on Daniel Malloy's shelf, okay? That's a very traumatic shelf. All right, so I'm just doing this in celebration of not just Anne Rice's work, but the adaptation on AMC, which I just absolutely love. And so this prompt is Daniel Malloy is a bright young reporter. Read a journalistic piece or a nonfiction book. And the book that I picked is an absolute doozy of a book. I thought that the last book that I read, Operation Nemesis, was pretty heavy. This was even heavier. So this is The Rape of Nanking, The Forgotten Holocaust of World War II by Iris Chang. This is published in 1997. The author also wrote The Thread of the Silkworm, which is a not authorized, like unauthorized memoir. I do want to read that at some point after I read this. And before I proceed, I'll just say this. This is a graphic, detailed book. There's no way around the subject matter. I mean, that's why I picked it up, because it's a journalistic piece. It's a part of history that the author doesn't want us to forget. Spoilers about, it's just like a book discussion, so I'm usually pretty spoilery. And so yeah, look up the warnings on this book if this makes it, in case you're thinking about picking it up, basically, just so that you're like mentally prepared. So that's basically what I think is the priority from moving on forward. So this starts taking place in like 1937 when Japan infiltrates China as a way through Shanghai and then travel to Nanking. And so what occurred was just like an absolute onslaught of mass murder. And so how this happened was, at that time, the Japanese military came in, lured in, or lured the Chinese military to agree to submit, and then divided that military, and then created like slaughterhouses. And then after that, the Japanese military continued to slaughter people, like by corralling people into this area of Nanking. Um, this book has its title because not only were over 300,000 people murdered in a very quick succession, but also there were just so many women that were assaulted. So just kind of keep, I want to put a asterisk next to that, because the focus is that women were assaulted, but also men were too. Men, let's say if someone took like a vow of like celibacy because of their religious beliefs, the Japanese soldiers thought it was fun to force them to do things to women. So that's two people that are being assaulted, right? And so it's only just like about this quick succession of murders that took place, but it's also about the torture. I can't even get my words out. The extreme levels of torture. This happened because the soldiers of that time, the Japanese soldiers, purely wanted to do it like for pleasure. So they would use people like target practice. So this was just such a horrendous time, and it went on for quite a while. And so you're just learning about like all these terrible things that happened. So, and it's not just about what happened. It's just that it happened so rapidly. And they even treated body. They've used people like target practice as if they were a part of a contest. So there's just like these deeply, deeply inhumane acts going on. Um, and the importance of the author writing this book is also the fact that, I've never heard of this occurring. There's so many places outside of China that have never heard of this, or there's very few mentions in textbooks. And so the author themselves wanted to rectify this because they knew about this, but that's because they had family members telling them about what occurred. That's my hat. And so we'll kind of go on from there. Also, the way that the author handles this is there's this relentless, graphic depiction of what happened because people had experienced this, and because they have gathered the information, they want it to be out there because if it's out there, then these people are not forgotten. And I think that's an important theme that's been going on, I think, throughout my readathon for Daniel Malloy. One is with this one. Also, Eric Bogosian wrote Operation Nemesis, and I also felt like that was very much present in the storytelling. Is that a horrendous event took place? So let's not forget the people. So let's write about it. Let's keep those stories alive because that keeps the people that have passed on, keeps them alive as well. And another factor that I noticed in this book that was present in Eric Bogosian's Operation Nemesis is that there is just industrialization and quick progress of military arms. And with that said, then this military goes into a vulnerable population, right? So it just creates the gives the opportunity for these kind of like situations to happen with a vulnerable population. Um, I wanted to quote the author in some way, something that stood out to me, and that is the fact that she wrote, I think she's like boiling down what this is about. And she says it's about power of cultural forces either to make devils of all of us, to strip away that thin veneer of social restraint that makes humans humane, or to reinforce it. And so we just see that there's a couple of things that went terribly wrong, which is it seems like the political and military leaders were just, for lack of a better word, like mismanaged. Like not everyone was privy to what was going on. So that's a huge, huge part of the problem. And also, there was just so much going on then because this took place from 1937 to 1945. But you know what? In World War II started in 1939. And then prior to this event in 1915 was the Armenian genocide. So there's just like this constant onslaught of mass murder amongst, war going on. So I keep bringing up Erica Bogosian's book because I definitely feel like there's some parallels between other powers being like so distracted that other groups get away with doing these atrocious things. Um, Also, because some people were kind of like finding out what was going on, then um, the Japanese military were trying to cover it up as if like the women were part of like pleasure houses. Not that that's already not okay in the first place, but they're just trying to like find ways to cover up like the disgusting things that they were doing. I mean, people were playing dead amongst bodies because the bodies aren't being cleaned up. They're just like piled high because of how many people were being murdered. People were running into homes to try and save their kids from their burning homes. So they were just tearing down people's homes, before they would treat them like their plaything and torture them. So it was just like a really inhumane time in history. Um, and so, with that said, as extreme and as graphic as this book is, um, the author also lets us know that there are people that could have left. They were given the choice, and those are people that were um, not Chinese. So, let's say if someone was a French priest or something that happened to be there, they were told, "Oh, you could leave," but instead they decided to stay and to create like refugee camps. Um, and that was established like in a neutral area in Shanghai. So there was this like very small resistance, and I think that really speaks volumes to even when you feel like something is so insurmountable and they're seeing all these horrors. That really speaks to someone's character that they say no and they're like, I'm going to stay here um, and try my best to protect the people around me. And it wasn't just men, it was also women. So that was like a vulnerable population, right? And women also did stay and would just try to keep up like the morale and just say like that China will survive this and the Japanese occupancy will not remain. And so it was really just like uh, holding on to hope as like a form of like a survival instinct that really stood out to me. But the thing is, there's also other elements of this that feel like a cognitive dissonance in my mind because there's a guy, I can't even think of his name right now. I marked it, but um, there was someone also part of the military, but he was actually a part of uh, the Nazis that was there and that was trying to write to Hitler and other people and say like, "Hey, these terrible things are happening here," and that blew my mind. I felt like it was three different dimensions of Twilight Zone. It made no sense to me. Um, and he was also someone that tried to get help. Um, I feel like I'm kind of there's just a lot going on in here, but that like really threw me because how do you reconcile that in your mind? And you know what? I don't think I ever can, or that would ever really make any sense to me. Um, there was a Dr. Robert Wilson who was like the only uh, surgeon during the massacre. I don't know if it's the same one, but there is someone that is like a guilty party, and once he went on with the rest of his life and became a doctor, he felt so guilty about what he participated in, so that in his I think he was a dentist. In his office, he has like photos of what occurred because he doesn't want people to be forgotten. I also listened to an interview with the author, and so now like my mind's getting a little bit blurred between what I read and what I heard. And what was so important to this not being lost completely was journalists. Journalists, photographers, they smuggled information out because Japan was trying to, actively cover this up. And if it weren't for those people that risked really their lives, we wouldn't know about this because there's also such a high level of like propaganda, like I mentioned earlier, there's so many bodies, and so they would clean up. The Japanese military would like clean up an area and then make it look like everything was fine, and then invite like outside journalists or people to examine and say like, "Oh, here, look, nothing's going on here," but really it was just part of the cover up. So once again, we're seeing what the governments want us to see versus what the um, journalists were able to smuggle out. And so when you pick up this book, if you decide to read it, there are graphic photos of what happened. And sadly, these are like really horrific photos of what happened to people. But if we didn't have them, we wouldn't even know they exist. They wouldn't be remembered. So that's a part of it. It's like to remember that this actually happened and like have the proof, have the evidence. But yeah, that's the only way people are going to be remembered now in this like terrible state. And so that really stuck out to me. Something the author said in an interview is that there was so much evidence when she started researching this that she had to create a whole database. So the fact that she had to create a whole database, but we're not being taught this in school is just, it feels like a crime in itself. And so I'm trying to remember if I should bring up anything else. There is a level also of what the author calls self-imposed censorship. Another element of people not knowing about this is because survivors don't want to talk about what they went through. And so it's actually the silence of victims that then reinforce this part of history being erased. And that also stuck out to me because I keep thinking of Eric Bogosian's book, Operation Nemesis, because the whole point of the Operation Nemesis was to make sure that word got out. Sorry, my cat's here. To make sure the word got out that the Armenian genocide even happened. And so here's also an example of we're not going to know about it if no one says anything. But yeah, there's so much. I feel like I'm not saying enough, but it was just a bit of a head spin for me. I definitely think it's worth reading, but just remember to like guard your mental health. And there's plenty of interviews. If you don't really feel comfortable reading the book, but you still want to know a little bit more about what happened, then I highly suggest you just, go to YouTube, type in the author's name, and there's going to be plenty of interviews about what happened at Nanking. Sorry, my cat's right here. You can't see her, but she's here. You can kind of see her. You should really say hello for all the grief you give me. Yeah, I know. Now I've given that very chaotic review. Sorry, everyone. I was just it was a lot. It was a lot mentally. I will go ahead and answer the 3 questions. My cat's staring at me like, why don't you hang out with me? Please stop. First question. Why does this character have this book on their shelves? This is such an atrocious, a monstrous depiction of violence, but at times there are people that have their humanity shine through, and it feels like there's this level of resilience and strength it takes to frankly put one foot in front of the other when you feel like everyone is against you. There's like just a mental fortitude that's embedded in this story. And so I definitely think that's why Daniel Malloy would have this book on his shelf. I think he's very much interested in those little nook and crannies of humanity. He really likes to scratch the itch of like the darkest recesses of humanity. That's something that he definitely explores as a journalist. And so I think that's why he would have this book on his shelf. The second question, did this book recontextualize a character for me. Yeah, in a way, I think it just really speaks to. I kind of feel like I've said this before, but this really speaks to the character's relentless spirit. In Interview with the Vampire, by the time we reach the second season, is it the second season? Yeah, I think so. The second season, Daniel Malloy tells Raglan James that he wants to get out alive. He wants both. He wants a story and he wants to get out alive. But there's this constant like this tug and pull, like this. There's this constant power dynamic at play, and he has to work with that. And at times, he has to find a way to manipulate the people in front of him because he's still trying to get the story. And I think that's something that I admire about the character. Um, but I also feel like sometimes I wonder about like what parts of oneself need to be monstrous in order to survive. Because that's basically what he's doing in the second season, right? He's trying to survive these two monsters in front of him. All right, last question. What book would I recommend to Daniel? And guess what? I didn't have a book ready like I should have. Let me see what I have on my shelves. Can you tell how unprepared I am? You know what? I need the pick me up. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend um, a book by my favorite author. Didn't see that one coming. This is the third book by Hanifa Durkheeb. It is a love letter to a group, a sound, and an era. It is called Go Ahead in the Rain, Notes to a Tribe Called Quest. I feel like reading this is definitely like, in one way, it's a step away from the material I'm reading, and then it's kind of circling right back into it. And it's ultimately the voice, the tone, the gentle spirit of the author that really speaks to, I don't know, survival and connection through music and what the connection means. So, just like how important the arts are. And since the author is, he's like a music and social critic, and also a poet. And so, because you have someone with such a beautiful prose that has a beautiful rhythm and connection, even like embedded within um, embedded in his prose, I'd say that although this is a love letter to a Tribe Called Quest, it's really like a love letter to the origins of sound, of musicality, of what resistance looks like, and that could be very different from maybe what you think it should or may be. And so, you know what? I hope Daniel goes ahead and picks this up because we need a break from what we just put ourselves through. Last thought about this book. What I appreciate is that what the author is saying is this is its own Holocaust occurring, and to forget is to then act the Holocaust for a second time for those of Nanking. And I thought that was like really powerful. So yes, definitely worth a read, but just make sure you are mentally prepared. If you read this book, please let me know your thoughts. There's a lot to discuss regarding this, but I just didn't want to make this like super long, or to be so graphic. If you read a different book for this please, please feel free to tell me below. I definitely want to hear what books enticed you, and did you meditate on Daniel Malloy? Do you feel any different about the character? Did you learn something? Yeah, did you learn something different, or see him in a different perspective that you didn't before? With that said, thank you for listening to this chaotic discussion. And just remember that life is chaos, so be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and read more books. Bye.